Welcome to Learn to Live Stress-Free. This is Christine Wright with Dr. Robert Wright Jr., your go-to wellness coaches of www.stressfreenow.info. Our featured guest today is Sharón Lynn Wyeth, speaking on her creation of Neimology science. Sharón Lynn Wyeth is recognized internationally as a name expert, as she can determine one's strengths, challenges, and the purpose of one's life by deciphering a person's name. Sharón created Neimology science, the study of the placement of letters in a name, after 15 years of research, followed by 3 years of testing her theories in over 70 countries, including Russia, India, and China. She then continued to develop how to interpret names over the next 17 years, which is why Neimology science is so accurate today. She wanted to see if her methodology held true in different languages, and indeed it does. The greatest gift that came from developing Neimology science was being able to see all people as one, as our basic desires remain the same regardless of where we live or what culture we're experiencing. Over the years, Sharón has been able to support thousands of people around the world in understanding themselves and others better. Today, she assists HR departments of different businesses in narrowing down the candidates to be interviewed, assists lawyers in how to present cases to judges, and couples and families on how to better communicate with each other. She also creates names for new business, new products, and when people wish to change their names. Her best-selling book, Know the Name, Know the Person, has won an award for excellence in writing. Sharón is a frequent guest on both radio and television, and we're very, very happy that she has joined us here today because she is brilliant. Sharón, welcome. Thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This is so thrilling.
Yes, Sharón, thank you. This is just so marvelous. We are happy to have you. And audience, you are in for an unbelievable treat today, and we hope you are going to be able to listen to the entire show and be as thrilled as we are to have Sharón as our special guest. Sharón, can you tell our audience how you became an expert on names and how you were able to come up with this system? As I'm pretty sure you have skeptics. You know, people would hear this term and they might be skeptical listening to the face of it.
Well, let me share a story with you first. The biggest skeptic was my dad, because every time he called me, I'd say, just a second, Dad, let me finish these thoughts on paper. And then I'd go, okay, I'm with you. And after a while, he said, what are you always working on? And I said, well, when I have spare time, I'm working on this thing about names and how you can interpret a name and see someone's personality predispositions. And my dad says, oh, yeah, like what? You know, and he's a physician, so very science-oriented. And so I said, give me a name of somebody you know and you know I don't know, and let me tell you about him. Well, we did that. And he says, well, that's interesting. And he gives me the second name. And then he gives me the third name. And then he gives me the fourth name. And then he gives me the fifth name. And finally I say, Dad, how many names is it going to take? 5, 50, 500 for me to show you that I'm onto something? And he goes, well, I can't endorse it because I don't know about this. And I said, Dad, I don't need your endorsement. And then he says, what are you going to call it? And I said, well, I was thinking about alphabetology, the study of the alphabet, but it doesn't ring true for me. And I said, so I don't know yet. And he goes, but you're not studying the alphabet. You're studying the letters in a name. You're really studying names. So why don't you call it Neimology? And I said, Dad, you can't trademark a regular name. And so he says, fine, spell it in the Latin spelling, N-E-I-M. So the man who had the most qualms about me doing this is the man who actually named the science, which I think is great. Anyway, it started when I was doing the seating chart in my 7th year of teaching, and my brain started saying, oh, don't put Julie next to Joshua because together they'll be clowns, but separated they'll be okay. And Stephanie's are going to be really stubborn, so put her over here on the side where I never have to move her seat. And Derek's going to need extra help, put him up close. Anyway, I was doing this, and as I started the 4th class, all of a sudden it dawned on me, wait a minute, I don't know these kids yet. What am I doing? And so curiosity got the best of me after I got over my guilt for thinking I knew something about somebody before I met them. And I wrote down for every child what I was thinking. And then I said, okay, I'm going to put this aside. I want to get to know the kids for who they are. So when I looked at that 3 months later during winter break, I was astonished at the accuracy. So I said, okay, my brain, thoroughly trained in patterns, having majored in math in college and having my master's degree, picked up something. Now, how do I make conscious what is unconscious? That's where the work started. There was a plethora of Davids in my life, and so what I did was I made a column for every David, and I thought, what have I observed about this one? What have I observed about this one? What about that one? And I made these columns, and then I said, what do they all have in common? Well, that had to come from the name David, and the stuff they didn't have in common had to come from the rest of their name. And that's how I started, with tons of lists and looking for commonalities. Eventually, I could break it down by the placement of the letter in the name. It took me 15 years to figure everything out, and bugging a ton of people and talking to everybody, especially as I got better at it and had some basis. I'd go up to people and say, I'm working on this combination in names. Do you know anybody with that combination in their name? Could you tell me about that person? I mean, and I always thought anybody who was on an airplane with me, poor people that sat next to me, I bugged them the entire flight asking questions. But that's how it started.
Wow, Sharón, that is an amazing story. When you were talking, what gave me a chuckle is when you were mentioning looking at your class list. You said, "Oh, if I sit this person next to that person, they'll be a clown," right? And I think everybody, when you're in elementary school, you remember at least one or more people in the class. You said, "That guy is the class clown," or "She's the class clown." So I thought that was really cute. Sharón, can you share with our audience some of the history on deciphering names? How did you develop your own baseline?
I started with doing those charts like on David's, and then I had a lot of Julies and a lot of Susans and a lot of Jose's in my life. So I just started those charts, and then I was going back over old lists of students to see what were predominant names, and literally trial and error and talking to people. Would you say you're this way? Would you say you're that way? And then I would say, okay, think of somebody with these combinations in their name. Would I be able to accurately say this about them? And then I got a ton of feedback. So if it hadn't been for literally hundreds of people answering all of my questions, I would never have started this or gotten where I am. You know, so it's not a one-man person. I mean, one-man job. I had a ton of people willing to help.
Right. As Bob and I are listening to our audience, what strikes me is the amount of time and research that you put into this. As you talk about creating this, it wasn't something that you just pulled out of the air, and you studied it for years. So you've had years and years and years, and now decades of experience of testing and observation and just talking to so many people. And I just think it's fascinating for someone to create a system like this. People have, but as I look at you, I said, gee, I would never thought to have done this. And, you know, thanks to your dad for coming up with a fantastic name. Neimology is a riot. It's a riot, and to me it's much more user-friendly than, what was it, alphabetology? But, you know, as I listen to you, I'm somewhat a fan of numerology, and you know, we've actually had a guest on our show, George Pearson, discussing numerology. So as you talk about Neimology, numerology comes to my mind. How are they? I can see a little bit of it. You know, could you share with the audience what is the difference, or what are the distinctions between numerology and Neimology, and are you getting something more different than numerology with your science?
Yes, they're very, very different, and I did not look at any other system out there until I had perfected my system, because I did not want to be influenced by something else. So as I was doing this, my friends kept saying, you need to look into numerology, and I said, I can't until I'm done with this. You know, I'm choosing not to because I want mine to be pure based on my research. So the good news is, in the last 5 years, I have looked into numerology and other methodologies of analyzing things like astrology and those things. So in numerology, you have 6 different ways you add numbers. 3 come from the name and 3 come from the birth date. Okay, and those 6 numbers mean everything. And then you can come up with another 2 numbers. Some numerologists do the Pythagorean theorem. The Chaldean does it differently. But anyway, you're always working with these numbers and what these numbers mean. In Neimology science, you don't use numbers for anything other than at what age is something going to happen. And that's a whole lot easier because it's just addition. And so in numerology, you're limited by the 0 to 9 digits. That's it. In Neimology, you have 26 digits. You have the placement of the digits, and then you have combinations of digits, of the letters. So there's a lot more combinations. So to me, it gets a lot more personal and in-depth than in numerology. However, numerology is excellent for giving you overview and what's going on now and really being specific in that. Okay? Neimology, to me, gives you personality traits and characteristics, what you're developing. Why are you here? What's your purpose? What did you come to share? What are your gifts? What did you come to learn? Where are your challenges? How can you get along with this person or that person? And it's really easy because even though it took me 15 years to develop it, I literally can teach it to anybody in 15 hours. And so it's very easy, and you don't need the other person's cooperation. So if I was going to do numerology, I would need to know your birthday. If I'm doing Neimology, the minute you say your name and any part of your name, you are giving me information about yourself. And so often when I meet somebody, I'll say, and how do you spell that? Everybody's willing to spell their name, and as they're spelling it, I'm analyzing it, and then I know who I'm talking to.
Extraordinary. I do know this about numerology, that it's about adding up these sets of numbers, and I was surprised. I think I knew the Chaldean system before the Pythagorean, and then I said, wait a second, I'm different in both. What I love with your Neimology, the first time I heard it, I said, I never heard anything, which it wasn't, because the first time I heard it, I never heard this before. What is this? And I said, how interesting. And as I listened to you the first time I heard you, that's when I brought it to Bob's attention. Bob, you got to listen to what this lady Sharón is saying. And I was hooked. And as you're saying, I think in this day and age, when we meet people, there's so many surprises. So any little assistance we can get, just enhancing positive communication, and if getting the name can help me with that. And I love what you said. I asked them to spell it so that I have time to analyze it.
Well, and some people will say, well, don't you think that's cheating? And I think, truth is truth. And just like when Thailand thought they were going to be invaded by Burma, that's a country that's never been invaded by anybody. But when they thought they were going to be invaded by Burma, they literally redesigned their buildings. And at the top of the buildings, like in Bangkok, they literally have all the positions for Thai massage, so that if they all got killed off and didn't exist anymore, could that knowledge be recreated? And that's what I think Neimology is. Because when you go back to ancient texts, okay, let's just take the Bible because a lot of people are familiar with it. There are stories of God coming down and changing people's names, like Abram and Sarai. And he changes them to Abraham and Sarah. And then Jacob becomes Israel, and Paul becomes Saul, and there's all these name changes going on. And when somebody changes their name, it aids in their personality changes, not in the core reason why they're here.
Right.
Okay, because your contract of why you're here sits in your birth name. And then the rest is personality when the personality shifts. And the last name represents your environment, and the first name represents the essence of who you are. And the middle name, if you believe in reincarnation, would mean this is who you were in your last lifetime. These were your lessons. If you don't
Sharón, I just have to jump in here. So what's the role of the parents here? Because a child doesn't choose her or his name, and then I've met people, and I said, what is your name again? And I said, that sounds like the name of some TV show. He said, oh yeah, my mother was watching TV, and she named me after the TV character. So that's what.
Well, then there were still only 7 religions on the earth. They all agreed on a few major ideas. And one of them was that the incoming soul impresses upon the one naming them what they want to be called. So we're naming ourselves. So if it takes the soul to have that parent watch that TV show, to love that name so they get the name they want, then so be it. There's also
wow, Sharón, you have just taken this show to the celestial level. My gosh, I never could have expected an answer like that from you. That's amazing what you're saying.
Now, there's a scientific thing, too. There's a science called cymatics, C-Y-M-A-T-I-C-S. And in that science, they have shown that sound literally influences our DNA. So what sound do we identify with more than any other sound? When somebody says, "Who are you?" how do you answer? Don't we always say our name as if that says it all? And indeed it does if you know how to interpret it. And so therefore, we're identifying with that sound. Our DNA is becoming that sound. That's who we are becoming.
That is just so lovely and extraordinary. On that note, audience, we will take a short break, and we'll be back on Learn to Live Stress-Free with our featured guest today, the incredible Sharón Lynn Wyeth.
Hi, I'm Dr. Robert Wright, Jr., the Stress Relief Doctor, co-host of the Learn to Live Stress-Free podcast series. I'm an author, speaker, and stress management wellness coach. My published study is the first to show the connection between stress reduction, grief recovery, nitric oxide spiking, and the relaxation response. And my practical application of this knowledge helps you relieve the stresses of everyday life. I have the tools to dissolve your pain points quickly and effectively. Email me to find out how you can start to feel better now at stressfreenow.info/contact. That's stressfreenow.info/contact. Have you been procrastinating about completing an important project or pursuing a treasured dream? Christine Wright specializes in helping her coaching clients to lay out clear, elegant strategies. She shows you how to quickly build your confidence to uncover and eliminate your habitual patterns of resistance and self-sabotage. Christine helps you discover those meaningful insights that will get you to do what works so you can celebrate your successes. Go to stressfreenow.info/contact to let Christine know that you're ready to live your ideal life now. Again, that's stressfreenow.info/contact.
Welcome back to Learn to Live Stress-Free. We're continuing our conversation with our special featured guest today, Sharón Lynn Wyeth.
Sharón, before the break, you brought up something that kind of took me for a loop. I really didn't expect you to say something so marvelous like that. What I was thinking about was this issue, a conversation with Carol Adrian. We had several years ago had conversations with her. She's a luminary on our website, and I was talking about synchronicity, and I had asked her a why question, and she brought up this issue of soul travel, that of course reincarnation, and then that souls can travel in groups. And so one way of thinking about synchronicity would be, oh, well, you've had this arrangement set up before you came here, and then you're just hooking up. So when you just brought this issue up, that sparked my light bulb to come on. Could you just talk a little bit about this thing with the Neimology, your perspective on how the soul or reincarnation would play a role here? You know, because not everybody believes in reincarnation, not everybody believes in that we have souls. So I think our audience could benefit from hearing your perspective on that.
Well, not everybody believes in the wind either, because you can't see it, but you can sure feel it. So
right.
when I look at the middle name, and not everyone has one, if the person believes in reincarnation and that is their level of understanding, then we read that middle name like that's what they were doing the last lifetime, and then they're continuing or using those skills to help support this lifetime and what their goals are in this lifetime. If the person does not have a middle name, if they don't believe in reincarnation, then we read the middle name as that's where they go when they're under stress, and that's how they change. And the reason they do that is because they have a whole lifetime doing it that way and developing that way. But we just read it as that's where you go when you're under stress. Now, if they don't have a middle name, that means one of two things. One, when they died, they came back so quickly that they're continuing from the last lifetime. And often you will find that they'll have the same or very similar first names, but they don't have the middle name because it's no longer relevant. Okay, they're just continuing on from what their plan was before that got prematurely interrupted. Or it can mean that they spent so much time on the other side working things out and learning that their last life is irrelevant to this life and it's a brand new plan. And what is really cool is Teresa Caputo, who's the Long Island medium, in her first book that came out after my material came out, I want to mention, she literally talks about the middle names being the same as the last life and gives an example of that. And the only reason I know that is because one of the ladies that has worked with me before, she got so excited when she read that in the book, and she goes, "You've got to read this. You've got to read this. Look." So, but that is my understanding. And again, it's just from patterns and listening to what people say.
Very incredible, very fascinating. Unlike Bob, I've heard this thesis many times before and many years before of us having influence in making decisions about what our life will be before we are born. And that is a concept, that not everyone is familiar with or agrees with, but if you are and if it does, I mean, this really is very fascinating. One of the other things, Sharón, that when we look at your body of work and what we notice in our work, and if Bob will allow me to use him as an example, is using nicknames. I'm not going to mention mine, but I'll use his. That
man!
Throughout Bob's life, he had one variation of his name as a young boy, and then as a teenager, as a young man, as an adult, he had different variations of his first name of Robert throughout his life. So what was playing out there? Because, the name came from the family. As a little boy, he's Bobby, and then, he's Robert. I'm calling him Bob. I introduced him to a family member. We introduced him as Bob, but they, for some reason, like to call him Rob, which is fine. We answer to that. What is that, and what's the significance of a change in the name over time?
When somebody is calling you a nickname, and most nicknames we do not give ourselves, somebody else gives it to us, they are literally saying, I want you to morph on my behalf. I want you to only show me the qualities and characteristics that are represented in this nickname, and the rest of them, you can just leave them out. So for an example, when you call Robert Bob, you are saying to him, you have a lot of perfectionistic tendencies and expect me and everybody else around you to be perfect. And when I call you Bob, you let those things go by the wayside, and I don't have to be perfect. So you're better off calling him Bob, because then you don't have to live up to this unrealistic expectation of perfection. And I would like to say to that perfection means you are perfectly willing to grow and change, and it doesn't mean that you're static in one situation.
Oh, no, Sharón, I can't possibly be a perfectionist. You have hit the nail on the head. In fact, that has been an issue. Sometimes when I had experienced writer's block, I was trying to figure out why was I stuck on, writing a particular thing, and then it came down to from time to time I do have this perfectionist tendency that I think at the beginning of the show you said a person. Or maybe that was off the call, you said with the T, because I have a T at the end of both names, and that would be some sign of perfectionism. So I was chuckling because sometimes that has stopped me in my tracks because I'm trying to do something perfect. But of course, we know now from experience that what we really want is excellence and striving for excellence, and this thing that, everything has to be perfect. I describe it as like trying to, always iron your underwear or something like that. You think that, so the thing is that excellence is the goal, or as a friend of mine reminds me, he says, the perfect is the enemy of the good enough.
Well, it is, and it takes you longer to do anything because you never think you're quite done. But back to nicknames, then if your parents call you Bobby, notice that they added a Y to the end of your name. And how many nicknames do parents add a Y to the end? And what they're saying is the Y on the end is the chameleon and the pleaser and can get along with anybody that they want to. So when a parent starts calling you your name but putting a Y on the end, they're literally saying, honey, you need to be more likable and work on yourself to please me and make it easier on me. You don't have to be totally who you are and who you want to be later, because right now you need to work for my approval.
So what's interesting about that? Okay, so my name is my official name is Robert, but I've seen so here's something that really I'm trying to understand here, and I think our audience would find interesting. Okay, so when someone calls me Bobby with a Y versus, let's say Bobby was spelled I've seen Bobby as Bobbie, and I've seen Bobby as Bobbi and Bobbi, and then the corollary question is, would it matter if the person is male or female, or does it not make a difference at all?
It doesn't make a difference whether the person's male or female, and often when I'm doing a reading and somebody will ask me about somebody, and I'll say he or she, and they say, no, it's the other one, and I go, well, okay, whatever, because it really doesn't matter. And there's some names that literally work for both men and women, like the name Courtney. So, I never know, but it doesn't matter, because what you're looking at is the qualities and the characteristics, and the placement of the letters. Okay. Now, when they spell the name differently, they're asking for different things. When a name is spelled like Bobby with an IE, they're saying, we want you to have a more generous heart and have an open heart so it's easier for you to love, and we wish for you to be really independent. When it's just an I, they're saying, learn to deal with attention. Be able to handle other people's focus on you and learn that. So it really comes down to the spelling. The majority of nicknames parents give kids end in a Y, which is be nicer, make it easier on me to like you. Okay? Then...
Right.
Sharón, I just want to take this opportunity to thank you, because this is very enlightening. And off the call, I think you brought up something that I think our audience will find fascinating. We had a brief conversation about the role of consonants. I know you were talking about vowels. So, for example, to just use my name, my first and last name both end with T's, and I think you also mentioned, like, for example, your name and Christine's name has an N in it. Can you just talk about the role of the consonant? I thought that when you mentioned the N, could you just explain how that works? Because your Neimology focuses generally on the vowels, but I think the consonant action is our audience would find fascinating too.
Well, the vowels represent our emotions and how we feel, and the consonants represent our attitudes and what we think. Okay, so both are equally important because they need to work together. When someone has a lot of one particular letter in their name, it means that they're learning the qualities that go with that letter at different levels. And so we had talked about the N. So if there's one N at the name, you're learning something on the physical level. If there's two N's in a name, you're learning it now on the emotional level. If there's three N's in a name, you're learning that quality and characteristic on the mental level. And four N's, you're learning it on the spiritual level. If you have more than four, you become a master and then become a teacher of it. So how you look at that is N is memory and organization. Okay, those are the brief Reader's Digest version of what N stands for, because there's a lot that goes with every letter. So if I was going to take organization on the physical level, because there's one N, it means that physical materials around you, you can organize and organize well, because you're dealing with the physicality. Okay? If I'm taking it on the emotional level, it's like, where do I keep or where do I hold, how do I organize my feelings so that some feelings don't get in the way of other feelings, okay? Or that some feelings don't block other feelings. I need to organize my feelings. If I'm taking it on the mental level, because I have three N's in the name, then you're looking at it and saying, how do I organize my thoughts so that I have fast retrieval? Because it's also into memory, so that I can recall information quickly. Am I going to use mnemonic devices? Am I going to segregate by subject area instead of seeing that they overlap? How am I going to organize my thoughts of information? When you see organization on the spiritual level, it's really how does everything fit in with everything else? What's the picture of the whole? What is the oneness aspect that everybody has with this energy? And so you're not only looking at where the letter is, but you're looking at how many of those letters throughout your entire name you have. Now, the other concept that you brought up was when the last name has the same letters as the first name. So the last name is always representing your environment, where the first name is the essence of who you are. So it says that your environment supports that which you are. Now, it can support it in different ways. By your family, when you're bringing up, your family could have demonstrated that quality or characteristic so incredibly well that you copied it, and it naturally became yours because you were going in that direction anyway. Or your family could so not be that way that you say, oh my gosh, I need to figure out how to do this because it's so needed. Okay? So again, your environment inspired you to become that way. So looking at the N again, which is organization, it's either the parents were very organized, and so you picked up their systems and you learned, and they taught you just to be organized, and that's the way it is. Or there's such a lack of organization and such a display of chaos or junk or whatever all around everywhere that you thought, oh my gosh, we need some kind of a system because we can't find anything. And so then you went out seeking how to be organized from others. The other thing that you asked, and your last question, was about the T at the end. So T's, again, the Reader's Digest version, because there's a whole lot in a T, and it depends on the placement of the T, but yours is the last letter of your name. So T's in that position mean you want to get to the top, and if you can't be at the top, then you don't even want to start because why bother? So the only time you're in the middle is when you're on your way to the top. So it's like an all or nothing. It also represents athleticism. Any T, any position means you've got to move that body. And the coolest thing about it is, the reward of it is that when you have something that you're thinking about that's troubling you, if you will go do some exercise or do something physical and then come back to the problem later, it's like the brain now gives you the solution. So you didn't spend time sitting there thinking about it, and you were active instead. And so that's very common among people with a T. And usually they stay a lot healthier if they've been active with their bodies.
This is just so fascinating, Sharón. I am absolutely certain. I'm going to go out on a ledge here. I'm absolutely certain that our audience is enjoying this as much as Bob and I are. As we wind down the show, Sharón, I do have this question for you, and I imagine it's quite a bit of your work. Listening to you now, I'm inspired to, change my name so that I can really maximize my gifts or what I'm missing or what I'm looking for. You've been telling us quite a lot about how our name affects what we're doing, and could you just tell us a little bit more about the gifts and challenges? And I imagine, as you talked about, the name you choose before you come here, the name you have when you're here, and for those who get married and, both a wife or a husband may change the name. People are using hyphenated names. This is such a rich science here and so many intricacies and fine distinctions that you have. Should we be all considering a renaming ceremony as part of our life?
I think it's really important to know what your birth name means and what it was that you desired when you came in and what you had agreed to do and to learn. So my understanding is, from reading many of the major works from different religions, is that we all have a purpose to be here. And that purpose is hidden in your name when you know how to read it. So the difference between the birth name that you're given, and I think understanding what it says so you understand why you're doing what you're doing, is highly important. And then as people change their names, They're literally saying, I'm changing how I'm going about learning that lesson, or I'm changing how I'm going about sharing those gifts that I came with. Every letter in every position has both gifts and challenges. Now, there's two letters that have very little challenges and huge gifts. So I call that the Holy H and the Divine D. And I have nicknames for everything so that it makes it easy to remember. And so, but if you know why you're doing something, I think that's what's important. And since the last name represents your environment, when you get married, your environment has changed. And so when women take on a different last name, they're literally saying, the influence, the major influence in my life now will be my husband and his family versus my growing up family. I am now morphing and changing. And the last name always represents your environment and what kind of people you bring to you, where, again, the first name is always the essence of who you are. So when you change your first name, you're saying how I present myself is going to change, but the core piece of you is still from that birth name, and it's always running subtly underneath.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sharón. We really appreciate your being with us today. I do want to give this opportunity to our audience if you would share how they could get in touch with you, learn more about you. And as you mentioned earlier to me, it may have been off the broadcast or on, that, that this is something that can be learned and that you do teach your system. So how can our listening audience get in touch with you?
Well, the easiest way is through the website, knowthename.com, because once you know the name, you know all about the person. And that's the easiest. Or they can call 210-355-6115. And the first weekend in November, I am actually teaching a class in the Boca Raton, Florida area. So I have 2 Level 1 classes left on the schedule. One is in Boca Raton in November, and the other one is in San Diego in September. And so you can come take a class. And that's really cool. There's 2 levels. The first class is just 15 hours, and you get all the basics and everything, and you can go out and be doing it, and you are doing it by the end of the class. And then the second level is for all the subtleties and how you really get a lot of experience in dropping the first name into the last name. In other words, how does our environment influence us, and how do you compare 2 names to know where the issues are going to be and where the joys are going to be.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sharón. So again, audience, you can get in touch with Sharón through her website, knowthename.com, or give her a call at 210-355-6115. And if you're able to, you can attend her upcoming live classes in Boca Raton, Florida, and in San Diego, California. Thank you, Sharón. This has been fantastic.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Sharón, what final thoughts or key idea would you like our audience to take away from today's broadcast?
That your name gives you information, that your name is highly important, and how well we identify with our name says how willing we are to accept the challenges we gave ourselves before we came and to express those gifts. And that everyone's name is cherishable, so it's highly important we call people by what they tell us they want to be called.
Great. Thank you. I know our audience appreciates that. So, audience, I want to thank you for listening, and I want to thank Sharón Wyeth again for being our featured guest. And audience, wherever you are in the world listening to this broadcast and whatever time zone you're in right now, we want to let you know that we appreciate your presence and we trust that you have benefited in some way from the information that was delivered during today's show. Of course, as always, we welcome you and look forward to receiving your comments about our show. Please let us know if there are any additional topics you'd like to see us cover, or if we had a fun guest on that you'd like us to bring back. Please contact us through our website with your feedback and suggestions. Remember, listeners, if you'd like to experience the same benefits our coaching clients get with us, including learning how you can get more results in your day and easy ways to dissolve your chronic pain, stress, and anxiety, then give us a call at 954-900-2179. Mention that you heard our Stress Free Now podcast show, and you'll receive a free gift from us. Call or email us today to schedule your appointment. For Christine Wright, this is Dr. Robert Wright, Jr. of www.stressfreenow.info. Until next time, be safe and be well.